Sandra Mitchell. You've been served. The thick yellow envelope slid across my conference table, stopping right next to my hand. I froze, my entire strategy team staring in silence. I ripped it open right there. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lawsuit from my own parents and my brother, Jerome. They were suing me for $250,000 for theft of intellectual property. My brother hasn't had a job in 4 years. He lives in a basement playing video games. But according to these papers, the company I built from scratch was actually his idea, and he was coming to collect. Before I tell you exactly what my brother claimed I stole from him, and how I made him regret ever signing his name to that lie, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I want to see how far this story travels. I sat in my office chair, the leather still smelling new, and read the lawsuit again. $250,000. That number wasn't random. It was calculated. It was exactly the amount of debt my parents were drowning in because of him. My name is Sandra. I'm 26 years old, and for the last 3 years, I've worked as a strategic consultant. My job is simple. I look at failing companies, find the rot, and cut it out. But apparently, I was too blind to see the rot sitting at my own family dinner table until it was already trying to consume me. Jerome is 29. He calls himself a visionary. I call him a sunk cost. To understand why my parents were suing me, you have to understand the math of our family. 4 years ago, my parents cashed out their entire $401k $150,000 to fund Jerome's crypto empire. It was gone in 6 weeks. Then came the dropshipping business, another 20 grand in inventory that is still rotting in their garage. Then the app that never launched because Jerome got bored of coding. He burned through their retirement like it was kindling, and they handed him the matches every single time. Meanwhile, I built my firm from a corner table at a coffee shop because I couldn't afford internet at my apartment. I lived on instant noodles and panic attacks. When I asked my father for $500 to register my LLC, he looked me in the eye and told me that struggle builds character. I believed him. I didn't know that while I was building character, they were writing blank checks to Jerome. I thought if I just worked hard enough, they would finally respect me. I was wrong. Success didn't make them proud. It made them hungry. It all came to a head last Thanksgiving. I had just landed my first major contract, the one that put my company on the map. I was proud. I bought a nice bottle of wine to celebrate, thinking maybe, just this once, we could have a normal dinner. But the mood at the table was like a funeral. Jerome was sulking over his plate because his latest venture had collapsed. My mother looked at me, then at him, and the resentment in her eyes was cold enough to freeze the room. She didn't say congratulations. She said, "It's not fair, Sandra." I asked her what wasn't fair. She pointed at Jerome. "Look at your brother. He's suffering. He's trying so hard, and the world just keeps knocking him down. And here you are, flaunting your success." My father chimed in, his voice heavy with that twisted logic they always use to justify their enabling. "You're strong, Sandra. You've always been the survivor. You don't need help." But Jerome is fragile. He needs a win. It is your duty to fix it. Give him a stake in your company. 50%. Just to get him on his feet. He deserves a chance to shine. I laughed because I thought they were joking. They weren't. They genuinely believed that my hard work was a family asset to be redistributed to the child they loved more. I told them no. I told them my company wasn't a charity for failed men. That was the moment I became the villain. They didn't sue me because I stole anything. They sued me because I refused to let them harvest my harvest to feed their golden child. They thought the lawsuit would scare me into submission. They thought I would write a check just to make the problem go away. But they forgot what I do for a living. I don't pay ransom. I neutralize threats. The harassment didn't start with a scream. It started with a vibration. For 3 days, my phone didn't stop buzzing. It danced across my desk like a nervous insect. 17 voicemails from my mother. I listened to the first one. Her voice was thick with tears. A performance she had perfected over 20 years. "Sandra, how could you? We're going to lose the house. You're destroying this family over money. You have so much. And you won't even share crumbs with your brother. You are killing your father. I hope you can live with that." I deleted it. I didn't listen to the other 16. I knew the script. Then came the digital assault. Jerome took to social media. He didn't name me directly, he was too cowardly for that, but he posted long, rambling diatribes about snakes in the grass and stolen valor. He wrote about how hard it is to be a genius in a world of thieves. Imagine pouring your soul into an idea, only to have the person you trusted most steal it and claim it as their own. Karma is coming. Mutual friends started messaging me. "Is everything okay? Jerome seems really upset. He was winning the court of public opinion because he was willing to be loud, and I was trying to be professional. But the real blow came on Friday morning. A courier delivered a letter from their lawyer. It wasn't a court date. It was a settlement offer. Or rather, a ransom note. They were offering to drop the lawsuit if I paid a one-time consulting fee of $250,000. But the kicker was the paragraph at the bottom. If I refused to settle, they threatened to subpoena my investors. They threatened to drag my company's name through a public trial, alleging fraud and theft. They knew I was in the middle of a funding round. They knew a fraud lawsuit would spook my backers. They were holding my future hostage. I sat in my office, the city lights coming on below me, and stared at that demand letter. My hand hovered over my checkbook. It would be so easy. I could write the check. $250,000 was a hit, but it wouldn't bankrupt me. I could pay them off, make them sign a non-disclosure agreement, and go back to my life. I could buy my peace. But then I realized something terrifying. Peace bought with extortion isn't peace. It's rent. If I paid them now, I was teaching them that I was a renewable resource. I was teaching them that the price of their silence was exactly $250,000. And when Jerome burned through that money, and he would, in a year or two they would come back. They would find another reason to sue. Another secret to threaten me with. Another way to bleed me. Silence is just submission with a prettier name. I put the checkbook away. I wasn't going to settle because I was afraid. I was going to settle because it was the only way to get them into a room where I could end this permanently. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Davis. Tell them I accept, I said. Tell them I'll pay. But I have conditions. I wasn't buying my peace anymore. I was buying the rope they would use to hang themselves. My lawyer, Davis, looked at me like I had lost my mind. We were sitting in his conference room, the air conditioning humming a low, steady note against the silence. You want to pay them? He asked, his pen hovering over his legal pad. Sandra, we can win this in court. It will be ugly, and it will take a year, but we will win. Giving them $250,000 is surrendering. I'm not surrendering, I said, leaning forward. I'm making a purchase. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a settlement agreement. It was a draft for a specific legal instrument called a warranty of authorship and intellectual property transfer. If Jerome claims he invented my business model, I explained, my voice steady, then he must possess the original source files, the early drafts, the timestamps. You don't invent a company in your head. You do it on a hard drive. If I am going to pay him for his intellectual property, I need him to legally prove he owns it. I need him to sign a sworn statement that every line of code and every page of the business plan was created by him, on his device, and has never been transferred to anyone else. Davis picked up the draft, reading it over. His eyebrows knitted together. This is standard due diligence for an acquisition, he said slowly. But Jerome doesn't have any files. He's lying. If we ask for this, he'll just refuse to sign, and we're back to square one. He won't refuse, I said, because he's greedy, and he's lazy. 5 years ago, when I was visiting for Christmas, Jerome borrowed my old laptop to play games. He didn't just play games. He copied my entire documents folder onto his external drive. He thought he was being slick. He thought he was getting dirt on me. He has the files, Davis. He has the original business plans I wrote when I was 21. He thinks those files are his smoking gun. He thinks if he uploads them, it proves he had the idea back then. Davis looked up, a glimmer of understanding sparking in his eyes. But if he uploads your files, he uploads the metadata, I finished. He uploads the digital fingerprint. I didn't tell Davis exactly what was in that metadata yet. I just needed the trap set. But we need a protocol. I don't want him mailing a USB drive. I want it live. Davis nodded, switching into shark mode. We set up a mediation. Neutral ground. We place the check in an escrow account. The escrow agent is instructed to release the funds only upon the successful completion of 2 steps. 1. Jerome signs the warranty of authorship, swearing under penalty of perjury that the work is his. 2. He uploads the original source files to a secure server in the room, and we open them on the monitor to verify they aren't corrupted. The live verification clause, I said. He sees the check. He thinks he's won. He signs the lie. He uploads the stolen property. And the moment he does, he commits wire fraud, Davis finished, a small, cold smile touching his lips. And since the amount is over a certain threshold, and he's using electronic means to transfer fraudulent assets for payment, that's a federal crime. You aren't settling a lawsuit, Sandra. You're orchestrating a felony. I looked out the window at the city skyline. I used to be afraid of my family. I used to be afraid of their anger, their disappointment, their noise. But fear is just a lack of information. I knew exactly what Jerome would do because I knew exactly who he was. A man who believed the world owed him a living so deeply he wouldn't bother to check the expiration date on the check. Draft it, I said. Make the check out for the full amount. Put it in escrow. Let's invite them to the table. The mediation took place in a neutral conference room at a law firm downtown. It was a glass fishbowl of a room, cold and sterile, with a single black camera blinking a slow, steady red light in the corner. My lawyer, Davis, had insisted on the venue. For the record, he'd said. My parents and Jerome sat on one side of the long table. Davis and I sat on the other. The atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. My mother wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on her hands, playing the part of the grieving matriarch forced into battle by a wayward daughter. My father glared at the wall, his jaw tight. But Jerome was vibrating. He kept checking his phone under the table, his leg bouncing a frantic rhythm against the floor. I knew why. My sources had told me he had a $20,000 gambling debt due by 5 o'clock that day. He wasn't just greedy anymore. He was cornered. I reached into my bag and pulled out the cashier's check. $250,000. I placed it in the center of the table. It sat there. A small rectangle of paper that represented my freedom. The change in the room was instant. My father's posture relaxed. My mother finally looked up, her eyes hungry. Jerome stopped bouncing his leg and stared at the check like a starving man looking at a steak. He reached for it. Not yet, Davis said, his voice smooth and professional. He placed a hand over the check. Standard procedure. We need to verify the assets being purchased. He slid the warranty of authorship across the table toward Jerome. This document states that you are the sole creator of the intellectual property in question, that you possess the original source files, and that you are transferring them to Sandra today. Once you sign and upload the files to the escrow portal for verification, the funds are yours. Jerome grabbed the pen. He didn't read a single word. He didn't look at his lawyer. He just wanted the money. And in that moment, I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I understood the depth of his delusion. It wasn't just a lie to him. In his twisted mind, he believed he deserved this. I remembered a moment from our childhood, when he'd broken my science fair project because he was jealous. My parents hadn't punished him. They'd bought him ice cream to cheer him up, because he was upset that I was upset. That was his entire life. He believed the world was a vending machine, and if he shook it hard enough, or if Mom and Dad shook it for him, the prize would fall out. He didn't see this as theft. He saw it as back pay for being the golden child who hadn't shined yet. He signed the document with a flourish. Done, he said, smugness dripping from his voice. Now give me the check. The files, please, Davis said, gesturing to the laptop connected to the room's main monitor. Upload them to the portal. We need to verify the chain of title. Jerome pulled a USB drive from his pocket. My old USB drive. Stolen 5 years ago, and jammed it into the laptop. Here, he said. The original business plans. The code structure. All of it. It's all mine. He clicked upload. The progress bar filled the large screen on the wall. Upload complete. The room was silent. My parents looked triumphant. Jerome leaned back, crossing his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought he had won. He thought I was defeated. I stood up slowly. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the screen. Davis, I said quietly. Check the metadata. Davis clicked on the first file folder on the big screen. He right-clicked and selected Properties. The Details window popped up, magnified for everyone to see. Created date, I read aloud. December 12th, 2021. The room went deadly quiet. My company launched in January of 2021, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. These files were created 11 months after I had already incorporated. 11 months after my first product hit the market. Jerome's smirk faltered. That's a glitch. The computer updated the date when I copied them. Let's check the content, I said. Davis opened the main text document. It looked like a business plan, but he scrolled all the way to the bottom, to the footer code, and highlighted a line of white text that was invisible against the white background until selected. It read, Draft V1, Property of Sandra Inc. Do not distribute. I watermarked every file on that laptop, I said. Because even back then, I knew you couldn't be trusted. Jerome froze. His face went gray. My father stood up, confusion clouding his anger. What is this? What are you doing? Davis didn't shout. He didn't pound the table. He just looked at the escrow agent sitting at the end of the table and spoke 2 words. Fraudulent inducement. He picked up the check from the center of the table and slid it back into his briefcase. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot. The condition for release has not been met, Davis stated. In fact, by signing a sworn warranty, claiming ownership of files that are demonstrably stolen and dated after the fact, and then using a wire service to attempt to collect payment, Jerome has just committed federal wire fraud and perjury. And since we are in a recorded mediation session, he pointed to the blinking red light in the corner. It's all on tape. Jerome scrambled up, his chair clattering backward. No, that's a trick. She hacked it. The meeting is over, I said, turning to the door. You wanted my money, Jerome? You just spent the rest of your life trying to stay out of prison. The room didn't explode. It imploded. My father was shouting, pointing a shaking finger at Davis. My mother was sobbing, a high, thin sound that grated against the glass walls. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Davis. He was calm, almost bored. He clicked his briefcase shut, the sound final and absolute. He turned to the escrow agent, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. Clause 4. Asset verification failure, Davis said, his voice cutting through my father's yelling. The condition for release has not been met. Return the funds to the buyer immediately. The agent nodded, typing furiously. Transfer reversed. The check is void. Jerome was still staring at the screen, at the metadata that had just signed his death warrant. I didn't know, he stammered. It's a glitch. It's a felony. Davis corrected. He stepped between me and my family, using his body as a physical shield. He leaned in close to me. Go, he said, his voice low and urgent. I'll keep them occupied with the termination paperwork. Do not stop walking until you are in your car with the doors locked. I didn't argue. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard my father screaming my name, but Davis's voice rose above it, citing statutes and demanding order. I walked down the long, sterile hallway, my heels clicking on the tile. I pressed the elevator button. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had done it. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like an escape. The parking garage was cool and dim. I found my car, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. I locked the doors instantly. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't get the key into the ignition. I dropped my head against the steering wheel, trying to breathe. It's over. It's over. Then the windshield exploded. A web of white cracks shattered my view of the concrete wall. I screamed, covering my head as shards of safety glass rained down on the dashboard. Through the spiderweb of broken glass, I saw him. Jerome. He was standing on the hood of my car, a tire iron in his hand. His face twisted into a mask of pure, feral rage. He didn't look like my brother. He looked like a stranger. He screamed something unintelligible, a raw, animal noise, and swung the iron again. Crunch. The metal roof buckled above me. You tricked me, he shrieked, sliding off the hood and grabbing the driver's side door handle. He yanked it violently, but the lock held. Open it. You ruined me. I need that money. This wasn't a business dispute anymore. This was survival. I scrambled over the center console, trying to get away from the glass. Away from him. He smashed the tire iron against the driver's side window. It cracked. Give me the check, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. Fix it. Fix it or I swear to God. Siren lights flashed against the concrete walls, painting Jerome's distorted face in strobes of red and blue. The building security, alerting to the commotion, had called it in immediately. Or maybe the escrow firm had hit a panic button. It didn't matter. 2 squad cars screeched around the corner, blocking the exit. Officers poured out, guns drawn. Drop the weapon. Get on the ground. Jerome froze. For a second, I thought he was going to charge them. He looked at the police, then back at me, his eyes wide and wild. The reality of what he had done crashed into him. He dropped the tire iron. It clattered loudly on the concrete. They tackled him. I watched from the passenger seat of my ruined car as they forced my brother's face into the dirty, oil-stained pavement. They cuffed his hands behind his back. He started crying, then loud, ugly sobs. She stole from me. She's the thief. Ask my parents. It's a misunderstanding. I opened the passenger door and stepped out, my legs trembling. The air smelled of gasoline and adrenaline. I watched them drag Jerome toward the squad car. He looked small, pathetic. I waited for the rush of joy. I waited to feel the thrill of the clapback, the satisfaction of the winner. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a heavy, cold hollowness open up in my chest. I looked at the police lights reflecting off the handcuffs. That was my brother. We used to share a bunk bed. We used to catch fireflies. And now, I was standing in a parking garage, watching him being read his Miranda rights because I had baited him into a felony to save myself. I realized then that freedom isn't free. The price of my freedom was my family. To survive, I had to become an orphan. I had to amputate the limb to save the body. It was necessary. It was right. But God, it hurt. One of the officers approached me, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you want to press charges?" I looked at Jerome one last time as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. I looked at the shattered glass of my car. "Yes," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I want to press charges. For everything. The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind exceedingly fine." Jerome didn't get bail. The assault charge, combined with the federal wire fraud indictment and the flight risk caused by his massive gambling debts, meant he awaited trial in a county cell. My parents tried to save him. Of course they did. They liquidated their remaining assets. They sold the cars. And finally, they put the family home. The house they tried to force me to hand over to Jerome up as collateral for a high-priced defense attorney. It didn't work. The evidence was on video. The metadata was irrefutable. Jerome took a plea deal to avoid a 15-year sentence. He is currently serving 6 years in a federal facility. When the legal fees dried up and the debts came calling, the bank foreclosed on my parents' house. I went to the public auction last Tuesday. I didn't go to gloat. I went to finish business. I stood in the back of the cold municipal hall, wearing my coat tight against the chill. My father was there, looking 20 years older, watching the auctioneer sell off the roof over his head. When the bidding stalled, I raised my hand. I bought the house for cash. I didn't buy it to live in. I bought it to ensure that the proceeds went to the bank, not to them. I bought it to evict the ghosts. My mother saw me as I was signing the paperwork. She started to walk toward me, her face crumbling into that familiar, manipulative mask of tragedy. "Sandra!" she wailed. "We have nowhere to go." I didn't stop writing. I didn't look up. I signaled the security guard I had hired to accompany me. He stepped in her path, a silent wall of black wool. I finished my signature, handed the clipboard back to the clerk, and walked out the side door. I haven't spoken to them since. They are living in a small rental apartment now, 2 towns over. I hear from mutual acquaintances that they spend their time blaming the corrupt system and their heartless daughter. They still don't get it. They never will. And that is no longer my problem to solve. I sat in my office this morning, the sun streaming through the glass walls. It was quiet. No phone calls demanding money. No guilt trips. No fear. Just the hum of the server room and the sound of my team working in the next room. I looked at the empty chair across from me and realized that the space Jerome used to occupy in my head was finally, blissfully empty. If you are listening to this, and you feel a knot in your stomach because this story sounds too familiar, I am talking to you. If you are the bank for your family, close the account. If you are the emotional punching bag they use to feel better about their own failures, walk out of the gym. You are not a bad person for saving yourself. You are not abandoning them. You are refusing to go down with the ship they drilled holes in. The price of freedom is high. It costs you the illusion of a happy family. It costs you holidays and phone calls. But the return on investment? The return is your life. And trust me, it is worth every single penny.